His name is Abapula, or Abba for short. I love Abapula. He is such an easy horse to drive. It's like a push button. He's pretty much on autopilot all through life. The mules, there's two of them, and they sort of walk different directions. You gotta spin all towards, so like they're reining them in. And then some of the horses they're sort of a mess as well. Abba, just steady as she goes, steady as she goes. Now, he's a Belgian draft horse. All the light brown horses with blonde manes, those are Belgian. Whereas the horses that are white, black, or dapple gray, those are French Bergerons. This is not the original church building. It is the third St. Philip's, and it is the second one to occupy that site. The first one at this site was built in 1722. There are two churches farther down Church Street whose congregations have been on the street since 1687 and 1691, respectively. So Church Street was named for those two churches. Now the 1722 St. Philip nearly burned down the fire in 1796, but it completely burned down the fire in 1835. The one that's there now was rebuilt shortly thereafter. It only dates back to 1838. Now, that congregation has had quite a lot of trouble with fire at their church, which tells me that members of that congregation must be getting up to some form of debauchery or nothing. They must be taking the lead from one of their pastors who, in 1710, was known as a bit of a drinker. Now, we're currently on Lower King, which simply means we're south of Calhoun Street. Lower King is home to high-end clothing boutiques, artist studios, antique shops, things of that nature. Y'all can spend a lot of money very, very quickly here on Lower King. And that is exactly what they want you to do. I don't know this for certain, but I would be willing to estimate that outside of Atlanta, on any given Saturday, more money is spent here along King Street than anywhere else in the Southeast. Now that is on a per capita basis, and it's also my own personal conjecture, so take that one with a heaping handful of salt. But this is the longest running commercial district in the United States of America. People that we did not originally allow in Charleston. The reason was that we were English, and as such, we were very much afraid that if you were Catholic, we thought that greatly increased the likelihood that you'd be a spy for either the French or the Spanish, both of whom were Catholic powers, and both of whom have been in the New World for over 100 years prior to the English. So our position in mainland North America at the time was anything but guaranteed. So it wasn't until after the American Revolution, bless you, when we were no longer Englishmen, that the first Catholic congregation was established. The first Catholic church, St. Mary's, about a 5 to 10 minute walk from our barn, and it is right across the street from a Jewish synagogue, and both of them are 1 block away from a Methodist church. That is why Charleston is known today as the Holy City. We have more places of worship per square mile than Rome or Jerusalem, and that has nothing to do with our behavior, believe me. But instead, at the time of our founding, we had the most liberal religious freedom of any colony because we were a business venture. We understood the best way to convince someone to move to a malaria-infested swamp was to say, we don't care who you are, we don't care what you believe, just move here and make us and yourselves money. But no cap. Now the cathedral itself is the largest church building in the city. And in my opinion, it's got the most beautiful church interior in the city. It is Gothic in architectural style, so think pointed arches. So the walls themselves are completely whitewashed. However, when you juxtapose the whitewashing of the walls with the light that streams in through the stained glass windows, the result is phenomenal. And when the doors to the cathedral are open, it's free to tour through at your leisure. Now, although the steeple is new, the church dates back to 1906 and is made of Connecticut brownstone. And remember, the first Catholic church across from the Jewish synagogue. Look at the top of the house across from the Catholic cathedral. It has the menorah up top. It is poetic. I love it. Now the street that we just crossed over was Broad Street, and that is Charleston's economic divide. South of Broad, where we are now, is our high rent district. Because in the south, we are closer to the convergence of the Ashley and the Cook Rivers and Charleston Harbor. And the sea breezes blowing off of those rivers and off of the harbor helps to keep these properties cooler. That is why they were originally more valuable, and once the wealth moved here, it stayed. Now coming up on the right, the yellow home with the red roofing, this is Victorian in architectural style. It is Queen Anne Victorian to be exact. But anywhere you see details like delicate woodwork out front, tracery or stained glass in the windows, asymmetric floor plans, hook turrets are a dead giveaway, all those are Victorian. Popular during the later half of the 19th century under the reign of England's Queen Victoria. So as y'all mosey about the city at your leisure, when you see things like this will give you a good idea of about when the homes were built. You can ballpark them to be roughly 1860 to 1900. This particular home, 1900. Charleston does have buildings from every major architectural period in United States history. From early colonial, like Powder Magazine, all the way up to the present day. Because we've largely been the benefactors of benign neglect, which is just a fancy way to say that after the Civil War, we didn't have any money. We couldn't tear buildings down, we couldn't build new ones, so our buildings just sat and they rotted away for decades. Is the Sword Gates house for obvious reasons. Now, these were done by our best known 19th century ironworker, a man by the name of Christopher Werner. When they commissioned these gates, they asked him for a pair of gates, which means 2 sets of gates. So they wound up with 1 more set than they needed. The other is currently on display at the Military College of South Carolina, the Citadel, a few miles north of us, up above Hampton Park. The house back here is currently for sale for $12.9 million, which makes it $4 million more expensive than a home currently for sale on the High Battery, which in my mind is because of one of 2 things, if not a conflation of them both. The one on the High Battery is violently painted, and the Green Street here, or Les Galets, depending on how French you want to be, was the first exclusively residential street in the city. There was not a mix of residential and commercial along this street. So there's a much greater opportunity for very large and very expansive yards and gardens here. We are in the suburbs of 18th century Charleston. One of my favorite yards and gardens in the city. I feel like it would be very gratifying to just lay on that grass. Right. Just spreading. In April and in October, the Preservation Society and the Historic Charleston Foundation offer a home and garden tour to the private gardens and residences of Charleston. So I'll see y'all again next week. Now, the very English-style home just next door was for sale a few months ago for 3.6. I don't know if it sold or if they just took it off the market. So it was just the latter. But just next door, in the first window, will be a very pointed message about hunger. Usually not that side. Now, this was the first one in the city to sell for over $1 million after Hurricane Hugo struck in 1989. We've discussed the Sword Gates house back there. This is the pineapple gates. The pineapples themselves actually designed to look more like Italian platinum cones. The home was built by a man named Francis Simmons. The gates were added by George Edwards. And it's his initials, G.E., that you see in the wrought iron on either side of the door. Now, after this sold in the early 90s, it underwent extensive restoration, including archaeologic excavations of the garden. They were able to determine what this garden looked like originally, and they restored it to its historically accurate condition. We added 47 blocks to the southwestern side of the city. Sold the house across this garden, 1797, Glenwood Boulevard, early 20th century. I mentioned the Green Street was the westernmost street. We've added 5 blocks to the city in that direction. We'll say 5 streets. I guess 6 to go all the way. 6 blocks. You'll notice the wrought iron in the gate over here to the right. Charleston is very well known for its wrought iron. On either side, we do of course have these pineapples. The reason you see so many pineapples around the city is a symbol of hospitality or wealth. The reason being when sailors, captains in particular, would be away from home for months at a time, upon their return, they would bring their wives exotic fruit baskets. Those were the diamonds of the day. With no means of refrigeration, the only way to get exotic fruit was to bring it straight up from the Caribbean. Upon his safe return, he would invite all of their guests over and feast to his safe return. Featured in the middle of the dinner table was that fruit basket with the pineapple proudly displayed as the centerpiece. Now, from what I understand, pineapple upside down cake is a symbol that you have overstayed your welcome. Fish and visitors smell after 3 days. Dr. Benjamin Franklin, who was second in one-liners in my mind, only to Winston Churchill. On their wedding night, he dropped her off at her house on Shad Street. He got back in his carriage, he came down the street, and he took right on the green, and he went to his own house. When he and her started close together, she get in the carriage, come down the street. Their relationship was friendly, though casual, and at the end of the night, she get back in her carriage and go back to her own home. They never once spent the night in the same house. Now, the thing is, whenever I tell that story, younger couples are like, oh, that's so awful. And older couples are like, tell me. Do tell. There's a lot of sense to me right now. And here we have the world's greatest man.
That's right.
You can't buy the other one about that. Yeah, we're going to be entering into more than a reel of straight Myrtle Street. We have a rather unique status in Charleston as that of shade trees. If you try to cut down or even drastically trim a crepe myrtle, you will be accused of crepe murder. It's quite simply not anything that keeps us cool is quasi-relief. Now, they are not native to the area. They're native to Southeast Asia. I believe they're even called the pride of India. But they were brought here by a French horticulturalist. And they have a very thin bark like a French crepe, and thus crepe myrtle. Growing up in the South, I didn't know there were people who didn't know what those trees are. Frost and fire are among the few things that can kill. They're like weeds. But you also notice that the Board of Architectural Review cannot make you maintain your home. That is what we call demolition by neglect. Once a house reaches 75 years of age, it can't be torn down or structurally altered by the hands of man, only by the hands of God. So essentially what they're doing is allowing the home to be torn down by the hand of God in the form of time. Once the house reaches a certain state, the board won't let you do anything unless you agree to do everything. North of Broad, many of those homes are currently lived in by college students. And let's be honest, as long as it's cheap and close to campus, who needs structural integrity? And if you want to hasten demolition of your home, let college kids live there. Never do. I know, I wasn't. And whereas the Green was explicitly residential, King, although residential now, was a mix of residential and commercial. This is a pharmacy, that a convenience store, and across from the convenience store was a gas station, but then it's been replaced with a home now. And also take a look at 87 and 89 Trad again. They're doing what's called the Charleston lean, remnant of an 1886 earthquake. Charleston averages about 10 earthquakes a year, but we only have a major quake every 300 to 500 years. And the 1886 was the last, which is why you'll see these round discs on the sides of homes. Those are called jib plates, or colloquially earthquake bolts, and the middle of the home is a jib rod. The rod has a turnbuckle in the middle. Plates act as washers. Once a month you turn the turnbuckle from quarter of a term. 6 months to a year, that would pull the buildings back into true. But it's only possible with masonry buildings, which is why the wooden homes are still living. Would anyone like to live in 82 and a half Trad here? Another one of those dependency buildings. There was a home of about that size further down King Street that sold a few months ago. Skip a few years ago. $900,000, 900 square feet. That'll give you an idea of what you pay about. Now, do we have any offers? No more? Some hands go up. The reason I asked is that it was members of this congregation, First Scots Presbyterian, who created the first golf club in the United States. 1786, it was called the South Carolina Golf Club, and they had a 3-hole course over in the western side of town. That's why if you see license plates in South Carolina that say first in golf, that's what that's referring to. So North Carolina can take first in flights, we will take the national golf. Now this is 59 meeting, of course. 61 meeting just next to it was the dependency for 59. But in 61 lived a man, Judge Waits Wary. Judge Wary, in 1947, ruled that blacks must be able to participate in South Carolina's Democratic primary. At the time, South Carolina was a one-party state. That was the Democratic Party. And for all intents and purposes, blacks were barred from participating. He also ruled in favor of a woman, a school teacher, named Septima Poinsett Clark. Mrs. Clark had been fired from her teaching position in Charleston County Schools after 40 years of service, simply because she refused to release her membership in the NAACP. He said that teachers, whether they be white or black, must be paid the same if their experience level is otherwise the same. His rulings were so unpopular that South Carolina's legislature has only convened once when out of session. It was so that they could get together and decide to give that man money if he ever chose to move out of the state of South Carolina. Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He never took advantage of the offer. He remained. Now I mentioned that we will be seeing the location of the first St. Philip's later during the tour. Well, explain. St. Michael's stands where the original St. Philip stood. And whereas St. Philip's is the oldest congregation, 1680, St. Michael's is the oldest church edifice, church building, 1761. When the doors to St. Michael's are open, you can go and sit in the same pew that George Washington sat in his presidential visit to Charleston in 1791. He used to buy or lease church pews in the same way that he would buy or lease a home today. In 43 was the governor's pew, and subsequently observed or distinguished guests. Now across from St. Michael's, on this side is City Hall. Robert Mills actually described City Hall as offensive to good taste, which I find ludicrous because I think it's a gorgeous building. But Broad Street ran down the middle of the wall of the city, and over on the other side of Meeting Street was a drawbridge that extended over the moat surrounding it. Meeting was the western wall of the city. Now, City Hall sits on the site of Charleston's original meat market before it was deemed to be too small and relocated to the current day market area. In the park behind City Hall would have become one of the tent cities where people who had had their homes destroyed by the earthquake came to live. Men and women, old and young, white and black, all living in the tent city here behind City Hall. Chalmers Street is the longest cobblestone street in Charleston. That cobblestone was originally covered over in sand. It simply acted as a layer of bedrock to prevent the streets from being washed away. Very likely it was originally used as ballast in the bottom of ships to help ships rise lower in water, thereby making the transatlantic for the sea. Now, is anyone on board staying at the Mills House Hotel? No, it is not the original. The original was pretty well derelict. By 1960, they tore it down and rebuilt this one. It is a very accurate replica, however. The only thing they changed, they added 2 floors and they added an elevator. The cornices over the windows are fiberglass replicas of the original, and the cast iron balcony is off of the original itself. It was from that balcony where Robert E. Lee watched as the 1861 fire approached the original hotel. The only thing that saved the original were work hanging wet towels from the windows, causing the building to blacken but not burn. Entering back into the fire line, which means that nothing of historic value has ever happened in this yellow building. But that site is where South Carolina signed the Ordinance of Secession. December 20th of 1860, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union, who will ultimately be the only one to do so unanimously. A vote of 160 to 0. And we are, of course, back up at the not-so-circular, not-so-congregational church. This is actually the 4th building to occupy the site. The circular congregational was the 3rd. The first was the White Meeting House. Let me be clear, that does not mean that only white people can meet there. That's what color was. We allowed everyone into the city based on religious convictions, except for atheists and Catholics. But there was only one church allowed, technically speaking, and that was the Church of England. Everyone else was known as a dissenter. Dissenters paid their taxes to the Church of England, but they could not meet at a church. They had to meet at a meeting house. Meeting street, meeting house is Church Street, when the church is up.